If there's one thing that truly bothers me in today's generation, it's the fact that horror movies these days aren't what they seem, aren't what they live up to be. And quite frankly, it's very disappointing knowing the fact that growing up in the 90s, I've gone through various horror movies. I've seen the classics. I've seen great horror movies growing up, and now that I am an adult and just getting older and I'm looking at these horror movies, I can't help but wonder what the heck is going on, and I'm making this video solely to just express myself in the state of horror movies today. And the reason for that was because I just recently came out of seeing the movie The Witch, and there were several other movies that were out right now that I haven't gotten a chance to see, like The Boy, and I think the other movie's called What Lies Beyond the Door, or Don't Open the Door, something like that. And I just wanted to express a few things before I, give my final thoughts on certain opinions and certain, aspects of movies. Growing up, I've always been a horror fan. I've always been a fan of horror movies, and I've grown up watching, the Halloween franchise, Friday the 13th, Nightmare on Elm Street, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Leprechaun, Chucky. I've watched Scream. I've watched the original Wolfman. I've seen them all. And growing up, there have been certain horror movies that have really, captivated, the audience per se. But then there are other horror movies that are just complete garbage. And for me, just going into the theaters today and just viewing some of these horror movies, it's quite disappointing if you ask me, because nothing ever lives up to what it seems like. For example, I just came out of watching The Witch, and The Witch was a fairly decent movie. It was very psychological, but at the same time, I was going in there expecting just a bit more, and it left me quite disappointed, especially with the ending and stuff. Now, the only reason why I have a picture of The Conjuring 2 is because that right now is the only franchise that I have faith in aside from Insidious. And after watching the first Conjuring film, after watching Insidious 1, 2, and 3, it kind of restored my faith in horror movies just a little bit. But not that much, honestly. And for me, like I said, growing up, I've watched The Exorcist, I've watched various movies, and now growing up, it's just like, man, what the heck is going on? Like, I have no idea what's going on with Hollywood. Maybe some of them are, quite frankly afraid to label some movies as horror movies, and just are afraid of putting them as rated R. Because we all know in today's generation, movies grow from like PG-13 ratings, and a lot of these horror movies today, quote-unquote horror movies, are hitting that rank. They're hitting the PG-13 rank. And I think sometimes, genuinely, if you're going to put out a horror movie and you're going to label it as like one of the most terrifying movies in recent memory, why are you going to make it PG-13? Was The Exorcist PG-13? Was, Halloween PG-13? Was, Nightmare on Elm Street PG-13? Absolutely not. And I feel like, in my humble opinion, that a lot of these companies are doing it for the money. Now, there's nothing wrong with money. Sometimes, companies do want to make profit off of their film after putting in all the work and time. But more often than not, they never execute what they're producing. So, for me at least, the reason why I have this picture is because I'm very confident going into a movie like this, as opposed to anything else, because, there are certain films that, once I go see, it's just a big letdown in a way, because, you live up to expectation. Like, for example, Paranormal Activity started off great with the first two films, and then once it produced Paranormal Activity 3, 4, 5, and the marked ones, and you had Paranormal Activity, The Ghost Dimension, it just went downhill from there. And it's such a turnoff as a fan, because you go into these films and you're just expecting the best, but you come out with like the worst of expectations. You come out like all pissed off, and you come out grumpy and stuff. And I'm a fan of movies in general. Like, I love all sorts of movies, primarily horror. But just after watching The Witch, I wasn't disappointed, but there were certain aspects of the movie where it just let me it just left a bad taste in my mouth. So, for me personally, I just think that the horror genre ought to rejuvenate itself and actually, for once, be original. Now, I know that might seem a little cliche, because some people might say, oh, well, what do you define as original anymore? Like, everything's been done. That's true, but at the same time, you could still, reuse and rehash certain things, but just be clever with it, just execute it in a better way. We have technology nowadays that could really produce some great movies, but sometimes with the direction of the directors and, with a certain, cast of actors and actresses you have, sometimes you don't really get that quality of movie. Like, for example, you may have the budget, but you may have like a terrible cast. Or, for example, you might have a great cast and like a terrible budget. So, it all varies on certain things, you know. I just wish as a fan that they were to go on ahead and produce frequent horror movies, because nowadays, if you actually noticed, there have been less and less horror movies coming out. Like, you get one or two maybe, you know, per year, whereas opposed to you get lots of action films throughout the year, you get lots of comedies and stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. But, you know, sometimes you have to go out of your way to go to bloodydisgusting.com or certain websites like that to get like your full taste of like what you want, you know, in terms of horror. Whether or not you want to go to an independent fest and find yourself a copy there, or do whatever you need to do. And sometimes it sucks because, you know, there are certain movies you want to see that there's just they're not available. You know, you have to find them on like certain websites and stuff, and it kind of sucks, you know. But mainstream horror is just it's been a huge letdown, at least for me. And I still have, you know, confidence, and I still have faith in the horror franchise. There have been certain movies announced that I am really looking forward to, and having high expectations for. One of many being The Conjuring 2. Annabelle 2 was, you know, announced, and I'm kind of iffy on that again because the first one was really bad. But again, let's just see how this one plays off. You have the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I guess you could say Leatherface. It's the origin story of Leatherface. I believe you have 28 months later, if that even comes out in the first place. I mean, we've been wanting to see that movie for such a long time. You have Jeepers Creepers 3. You have, I think, Human Centipede 3 or Human Centipede 4. Somewhere along the lines, like you have another Human Centipede coming out. You have another Saw movie coming out. So there are certain films that, you know, are coming back per se, or like they're making, you know, one more movie or sequel, whatever the case may be. And quite frankly, you know, some of them I am looking forward to, some of them I'm not. But just overall in general, I just wanted to share my thoughts on the matter because, you know, it's important. It's important for me because I want to go into a movie and just, I mean, I hate to use the word, oh, I want to be scared, but at the same time, I want to watch a horror film and be able to like walk into my room later on that night and not be able to fall asleep, you know. That's what I think the atmosphere of a horror movie should be, like, just creating that premise to where you're terrified to go to sleep. And nowadays, it's almost as if you could watch a horror film and just get a kick out of it. You just get a good laugh out of it because it wasn't, you know, psychologically or mentally affecting you in any way. So I don't know. It's just really weird because I do want to see more horror films. And again, it's just one fan's perspective. This is just my opinion, you know, like many other people out there might disagree. A lot of you may agree. I would love to know your overall thoughts down in the comment section below. But just for me in general, like horror films have been such a letdown because, you know, they're marketing all the wrong things. And for me personally, I just wish that they were to be a little bit more creative and a little bit more original as to what they present. And is that really asking for too much? Not really. But all I want to do is just go into a movie theater and just see a great horror film. Nowadays, you just have like these watered down movies that I mean, quite frankly, like they don't appeal to like the hardcore viewer. Like they appeal to kids and stuff. It's just really weird. We're living like in a weird ass time. You have the superhero franchise taking over, which is awesome. You have lots of great comedy movies coming out. That's all fine and dandy, but what about the horror franchise, you know? Hashtag save the horror franchise, because if you really think about it, I mean, over the course of what, a decade now, 10 years, horror movies have been, like, depleting. And what I mean by that is, like, they come out with, like, a few good ones throughout the year, and the rest are all, like, on DVD or something. It's just, it's a crazy time. But I just wanted to share my thoughts on that. So let me know what you guys think down in the comment section below about your thoughts on horror movies. And thank you all for watching once again, guys. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll be seeing you all later. Take it easy, everybody. Peace.